This is the Power Element Podcast, episode 49. All right, my name is Paul. I produce the podcast. I am a journeyman lineman by trade. Today we have a full-length episode recorded in studio with Dr. Kevin Rindal. Kevin is the co-founder of Vimocity, a movement health company. We dive deep. This is a great episode with tons of information. We'll get to the show, but first, let me highlight a few of our promotional partners. Milwaukee Tool. Since the company began in 1924, Milwaukee Tool has led the industry in developing innovative solutions that deliver increased productivity and unmatched durability for professional construction users. Head on over to MilwaukeeTool.com or at Milwaukee Tool on Instagram for the latest and greatest. All right, next up, our friends over at Dragonwear. Keep your focus on the job, not the changing conditions. Dragonwear's Pro Dry Tech FR shirts and beanies offer unparalleled heat stress relief, moisture management, and sun protection, ensuring you stay safe and comfortable all day long. The Power Element Podcast listeners can score 10% off using code NEWGEAR10. Once again, that's NEWGEAR10 at dragonwear.com. Head on over today. Wagner Smith Equipment Co. is your one-stop shop for all your job site tooling and equipment. You can expedite and simplify your day with a large assortment of trustworthy services and products. Visit wagnersmith.com, download their app, or give them a call at 866-66-6567. Wagner Smith Equipment Co. are your preferred tooling and equipment experts. All right, Klein Tools, Working Athlete, Gel Co., Eyewear, and Buckingham Manufacturing. Also proud partners of the Power Element Podcast. Appreciate you guys. All right, Daniel Sanchez, that's the music you hear right now. Daniel's the son of a journeyman lineman, Easy Sanchez. I'll put his info in the show notes. Special thank you to Lineman Mama and High Voltage Commando. All right, last but not least, I want to thank the entire Sturridge Electric California workforce. Without you, this podcast would not be possible. All right, enough of that. Let's get to the show. The Power Element Podcast, episode 49. Enjoy the show. You need to continually be a guy on the rise. That is a reasonable expectation, as opposed to just coming in here and putting in the time. What do I mean by that? I mean the things that made you viable in the past aren't going to be the things that make you viable moving forward. You got to be continually pressing to get better. That's a quote from Mike Tomlin, head coach of the Pittsburgh Steelers. I thought it was pretty good for the conversation we have today. What do you think, Kevin? You like that quote?
Love it.
Thanks for joining us, man.
Yeah. So happy to be here, man.
All the way from Seattle.
Yeah.
What do you think about the weather today?
So good to see the sun. This time of year is pretty rough in the Pacific Northwest, but yeah, I love seeing the sun here.
You guys are kind of going in a little bit, no snow, right? No snow,
no,
which is weird, right?
It was just late snow.
Oh.
So we got hit pretty hard in March, first part of March, up in the mountains. My family skis a ton, so they got like almost 5 feet of snow in about a week. So yeah, we've been hitting the slopes up. You can do a lot of Seattle, right? A lot of activities, either like water, mountains, some coffee, I guess too, right? For sure. Yeah, no, I spent most of my life there. What I love is you can be on the water in the morning, be up in the mountains in the afternoon. So yeah, everything's super close. But
hiking too, right?
Hiking, yeah.
And
mountain biking.
You're a runner too, right? You run?
Trail run.
There you go, trail running, good stuff.
Doing a 50K this weekend.
50K this weekend?
Yeah, 50K.
Just like that? Just like that.
Let's talk about that real quick. Where's it? It's going to be in Seattle? It's actually up in Bellingham, which is about an hour and a half north of Seattle. So,
and is this something Kevin does 3 times a year?
Yeah, this year it's going to be, I've been doing one this weekend and then one in May and then a half Ironman in September. So
Half Ironman.
Yeah, but this is stuff I've done for like 20 years. It's just, I operate my best when I have a goal, I'm moving, all that stuff. So
yeah, for sure. That's good
for
stuff.
me, it's just much like therapy as it is, wanting to accomplish a goal.
I appreciate your passion. That's cool. I did one marathon in my life, and that's good enough for me. I could do a 5K maybe, but other than that, stick to it. Yeah. Cool, man. Good luck.
Yeah, thank you.
You going for PR? Or you just kind of chug along?
Just chugging along. Yeah, it should be fun.
That's cool, man. All right, we'll go back a little bit. I want to talk about early Kevin. Where'd you grow up? And we'll get into your story.
Yeah, for sure. Grew up in Washington State. Kind of born and raised there, and everyone in my family was farmer, fisherman, or a logger, or a chiropractor. And so just grew up with, hardworking people all around me. My dad was a chiropractor, or is a chiropractor. And so I saw that. I always played a lot of sports growing up. And when I was a junior in high school, I was super passionate about football. That was what I wanted to do going into college. Had a couple of pretty big injuries, separated my shoulder and multiple concussions. And then went into my senior year, same story, concussions, ended up having to stop playing football. And so it was really one of those things where it's like, man, my whole life has been focused on, wanting to actually be the athlete out there on the field, but realize that, I also had this passion for helping other people. And so went down the path of going into sports medicine and chiropractic school. Really wanted to help elite and professional athletes perform at their highest level. And so had the chance to work with the U.S. Olympic team for about 13 years. 10 of those were with the U.S. Olympic swim team as part of their sports medicine staff, and also worked with U.S. women's ice hockey, and just had a phenomenal time actually being able to work with these athletes to perform at their highest level, recover from injuries, prevent injuries. And it really, for me, I'd lived that personal experience of having an injury keeping me out from doing the things that I was passionate about. And so, that's a huge part of my growing up.
Going back to while you're becoming a doctor of chiropractor.
Yeah.
Do you have to make a shift of like, okay, I want to work with highly high performing athletes, or I want to be kind of just working with everyday folk? Is there a shift, or is that kind of just after once?
Because I had my own clinic as well. So,
okay.
and I practiced with my dad for a few years as well. So like I spent a lot of time. I mean, a majority of the time was actually working with everyday people, hardworking people, athletes who just wanted to perform at a high level. And then working with the professional athletes was definitely like side project, passion project. And so that was outside of my clinic. But yeah.
What made that shift? How'd you get from that next level and into that career?
Yeah. I had aspirations for myself to become an athlete. And I was like, you know what, if I'm not going to be able to do that at that level, I want to be able to help others be able to perform at their highest level. And I just remember, man, I was like, I guess it was the 1984 Olympics. I still remember watching those Olympics, and I was like, I was just so much respect for these athletes. And it's like, if I could do anything, it would be use my skills, use my gifts to be able to help those athletes perform at that level. And so it just became a passion project. And I mean, I married an amazing woman who, Dana, and she just was so supportive. I mean, it was a lot of sacrifice. I was gone a lot during, basically from 2010 to 2016, pursuing that. And it just opened up a lot of really cool opportunities.
I think when you say it, that you were part of the U.S. Olympic team, but last week I was on a webinar and you showcased a photo of you behind Michael Phelps at the award ceremony. And I think that puts a little perspective of how close you were to that kind of greatness and to be a part of that team. Yeah.
I mean, I look back and I'm like just eternally grateful. I mean, the 2006 Olympic swim team, that was the most successful Olympic team in history. They won 34 medals, and I got to spend 10 years with Michael Phelps, and you think about Katie Ledecky and Missy Franklin and Ryan Lochte. There are just so many amazing athletes that came through during that time period, and I was just fortunate to be a part of that team at that time frame.
Yeah, I think that's super unique. You're talking about 1% of a 1% already, or probably even less than that. That's it's just amazing. That's crazy.
Well, and what's amazing is that the same people keep showing up. It's like they have this mindset of like, I belong here, and so I'm going to make this team. And you think about, the hundreds and thousands of people that are going for those 1 or 2 positions on the team, but they keep showing up. And when they get to those competitions, they're like, yeah, I'll never forget, if you don't mind me telling the story. Like,
no, please do.
Yeah, Michael Phelps, he and his coach Bob Bowman, like legendary coach, and they had a little bit of a contentious relationship at times, but they pushed each other. But Bob would always have Michael do this one workout where this was when he was at the University of Michigan, where he'd shut off all the lights in the pool, and he'd have Michael swim with no goggles, and he'd just have to do lap after lap after lap. And so it was just basically him becoming so comfortable in the pool. He knew where he was every single stroke. And Michael hated it because, you're swimming hard, completely blind. And but then he gets into the Olympics, and it was 2012. Most competitive event for him, which was the 200-meter butterfly. He jumps in and his goggles fall off like within the first couple seconds. And so most of us at that point, we were like, race is over. It comes down to like 0.1 of a second. It's like any type of disadvantage like that, you're like, it's over. But he had practiced like time and time again, swimming completely blind. And so he swims that race, and not only does he win the race and wins the gold medal, but he sets a world record. And when you think about how audacious it is to even set a world record, fastest time that event has ever been swam in history, and he did it basically blind the entire time. It just goes to show like what level of resilience, mental fortitude those athletes have to perform at that level. So yeah, it was so cool to be a part of those type of moments, and just in the back, and like, oh my gosh, we're seeing history here.
Yeah, that's really cool, and I just think about that too. And we'll get to the conversation later. I'll kind of jump ahead right now for the case of the conversation. But you talk about the preparation and the performance of a high performing athlete that is at their peak. Everything's right. Everything's been documented and geared towards this event, and you have unforeseen incidents happen, just like on the job or just like anything, and you still kind of have that high standard, and you're able to compete and win. So that's cool. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, but I think it goes back to like, we should all, in a sense, be preparing for the unexpected. And because you never, especially in a work type situation where you're talking about high energy hazards and all these other things that are going on, like keeping your head in the game and practicing for those moments when you can't predict what's going to happen. That's ultimately what sets you apart and keeps you safe.
Yeah, essentially, if it shocked him when the goggles fell off, there's no chance he's going to perform as high as he did. Like, it was just continue on about my business. Like, that's amazing.
Yeah. A really good example.
What else did you? I think you have a unique scenario where like you're observing and then you're applying your skill, your craft to help be a part for them, the athletes to peak perform. But what did you notice different about Olympic athletes? What sets them apart?
Yeah, I think it just goes back to they're so focused on the bigger picture. Like, they have a coach to help them from a nutrition standpoint. They have a coach to help them like strength training outside of the pool. They have a coach that helps them when they're in the water. They're like so detailed when it comes to recovery. And I think what it showed me is to have that level of precision is really, it's essential at that level. You can't not focus on different areas. And I think, all of them also had sports psychologists who worked with them. Because so much of performing at that level also is just like what's going on between the ears and how are you keeping yourself sharp in those moments, because there are so many highs and lows. And I think I really appreciated seeing just how dialed in they were in so many different areas of their life and their performance.
Is there anything you utilize now reflecting back on that time?
Yeah, I mean, for me, we had a sports psychologist who traveled with us when we would go, and phenomenal coaches. And so I oftentimes think back to some of those moments where, you know, there was adversity and the team worked through that. There are simple things that I do in my own life, like I have a Whoop band, which we both have them. And so like thinking about like my recovery, I mean, that's something that I'm super dialed in every day. Like, what is my sleep quality? What are the things that are going to impact my ability to recover? Just because it's like, I want to perform at a high level, not only for myself physically or from a business perspective, or, you know, most importantly for my family. I want to be able to, you know, be my best when I'm with them as well. So that's a simple tool that I took away from working with them.
Yeah, that's cool. And that's, I think that's a natural progression too, as far as like once you looking to compete at the high level and just compete. I'll share examples like our rodeo team that performs at high level. They want to win. They show up to win. Sometimes that's not the case, but the goal is always to win. But when I talk to Dan, Steve, and Enoch, like they're looking for ways to increase their skill by half a second, or, you know, even smaller, anything they can kind of do to better put themselves in a better position to win. So, and that was just a natural progression. Like we're working amongst each other to get that. And I think those good crews naturally do that too on the job too. So, yeah, I'm already kind of breaking my own rules, staying in a path here, but we'll shift. I want to get into what you do. Obviously, you're passionate and you got some great experience. That's neat. So I bet you're looking forward to the Olympics. Well, it's summer.
Summer 2024.
Yeah, that's pretty cool, huh?
Yeah. So it's fun to be able to watch them from, you know, the living room and be able to just think back to those moments. And my kids are now 14 and 11, and so it's pretty cool to, you know, I mean, they were pretty tiny when I was traveling with the team, and so just being able to share some of those stories with them is really fun.
That's cool, man. That's incredible.
Yeah,
good for you. All right, let's get into what you do now. How that path shift from you to the Olympic, Kevin, to what you do now?
Yeah. So in 2016, I had just come back from working with the Olympic team, and my focus was on helping these athletes basically put together a framework for how to take care of their bodies. And so a lot of it was preparation for activity, recovery from activity. If someone had like a sore shoulder, tight lower back, things like that, you know, that was where I did a lot of the hands-on work with the team. But in 2016, some executives from Utility in Seattle, where I'm based out of, were patients of mine in the clinic, and they're like, "Hey, Kevin, what you're doing with the Olympic team, can you bring that to our workforce? Because, you know, sprain, strain, or soft tissue injuries are the #1 injury that we experience." And so had the opportunity to do a pilot with about 1,200 of their members of their workforce. So it was electric linemen, substation employees, gas techs, hydro employees in generation. And so we basically ran a pilot with them. We did functional movement screens for all the different workers, and they gave them a framework for how to take care of their body. And it was really eye-opening for me because, you know, I lived in this world every day of like body care and recovery and stuff like that. But just when I started working with them, I'm like, man, the workforce, like the information that they have and the way that we're teaching them to take care of their bodies, it's like 25 years outdated. Like no athlete would approach taking care of their body this way. But
touch your toes.
Yeah, exactly. But I mean, the thing is, it's like, these are some of the most highly skilled people in their crafts. They know how to take care of like equipment, take care of the grid, repair, you know, power poles in major storms or in power lines. But we never give them the fundamentals of how to take care of their bodies. And so that was my first aha moment, is that, you know, we needed to teach people the fundamentals so that just like brushing and flossing their teeth or maintaining their tools, their equipment, people understand what to do for their muscle and joint health, so that they don't go down this road of just, you know, grinding every day and breaking down their bodies. And it honestly, it struck a chord with me because my grandfather, he was like a pipe fitter for probably 40 years, and he raised cattle on the side. And by the time he was in his 60s, he was so broken down, he could literally hardly stand up at the end of the day. And he used to tell me things like, hey, Kevin, this is what getting old looks like. And, so from a 10-year-old perspective, it was like, yeah, maybe that is what it looks like to get old. But then as I got into healthcare, I started realizing, man, this is not how life should look. Like there are things that people can do to offset that pain, stiffness, and soreness, and life does not have to look that way. And so this really started to become a passion for me to be able to work with the workforce, give them that framework, give them the tools so that, hopefully they can get to the end of their careers retiring strong so that they can do the things that they care about.
Did you have to shift your perspective in your skill set from a sports athlete towards, and I'll steal your word from the webinar, to industrial athlete? What's that look like? Are you kind of dealing with the same kind of problems or?
Yeah, I mean, the human body tends to break down the same way, whether you're an elite athlete or a lineman. I mean, we do a lot of those similar tasks, and that's why I think there's such a strong correlation. Like a lineman or a gas tech, they are athletes. What the stuff that they do every day, they're putting their bodies in positions that are oftentimes awkward positions when they're working in. They're straining their body, and they're going to feel shoulder tightness. They're going to feel back pain, and so it wasn't a huge stretch between the two and being able to relate that. I think for me, the big thing was understanding what people did day in and day out so that the way that we delivered the information really honored the work that they did and do, so that we could, adapt these concepts to what was relevant to them.
Do you think the industry, utilizing those 25-year-old principles, do you think they were just kind of hoping people would take care of themselves? There was a lack of understanding. What do you think that kind of falls under?
Well,
because I'll agree with you.
Yeah.
Typically, it's pretty informal, and there's a walkthrough of it, but like to actually understand it is a whole different meaning.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah, for sure. The activities that help somebody prepare their body for activity or to take care of their muscle and joint health, it requires some initiative, and it requires people to be engaged in that. And I think that, I spent 15 years trying to get patients to do their exercises. It was like an uphill battle. I mean, we're talking about behavior change. We're talking about getting people to buy in. And so I think that in general, that standard stretch and flex at the start of the day, oftentimes it can be a point of contention because people are like, I don't want to do this. And then management is like, it's taking too much time. And so it just feels like there's a little bit of a rub there to start out with. And so oftentimes that preparation just becomes a check the box. And it's like, okay, we did it. But I think that when people understand the bigger picture and realize that, number one, for the workforce, when they do these things, it actually helps their body feel better. And so that they can hunt, fish, do all the things that they care about outside of work. I mean, that's the incentive for them. For the company, it's like, man, when our athletes or workforce athletes are performing at a higher level, I mean, everyone wins. Like, we're doing better quality work. People's heads are in the game. Our workforce is feeling better. We're taking care of them. So I think that dynamic of this aspect could be a lot healthier if it was just approached in the right way and we gave people, that bigger picture in terms of the incentives on both sides.
I like your analogy too or bringing awareness to, like, we're trained to construct a power pole or troubleshoot, and then even to run equipment. But then when you talk about our bodies, we're so focused on the work that we kind of forget about that, and that kind of falls second. But that's probably the more important things we should be focused on every day. So I think developing those soft skills of understanding of one leadership, which we like to approach Sturdy, California, and then just that gaining that knowledge of kind of what you guys are doing.
Yeah, but you have to approach it from a what's in it for me, especially for the workforce. Like, they have to understand the bigger picture, and like, man, I'm so grateful that my company provides me the time to do this. Like, if you can get to that level, and then the company's like, man, this is such a priority. You're our greatest asset. We're going to give you this time. We're going to give you the tools, the knowledge, the resources. It just creates a really healthy dynamic, and I've seen it just transform companies in terms of their effectiveness, their efficiency, that trust between, the workforce and the management. So yeah, I think it can be a really positive thing when it's done well.
Yeah, I think to your point is the work's always going to be there, and utility work is typically the equipment is heavy, and the materials are only getting heavier. It seems like. So, at what capacity can you perform these tasks and not hurt yourself? So you can hunt, you can fish, you can lift up your kids, you can throw down the ball, and as near as a pain-free opportunity, you're going to enjoy life a little bit better, and then you're going to be happy to go to work.
Totally. Unfortunately, we live in this society though that's like totally reactive, and so all pain is it's the body's warning system going off saying, hey, there's a problem here. But oftentimes when the fire alarm's going off, we just get the fire extinguisher and we try to put out, the fire alarm. And it's like we throw ibuprofen, we throw a 6-pack of beer at the end of the day. We do all these things to try to numb the pain, but we don't necessarily address what the actual problem is. And that's where, if we can give people the tools and the knowledge so that they can problem solve stuff before it becomes something bigger, and they are on a regular maintenance program for their body, that can oftentimes offset a lot of those, reactive approaches to pain that we oftentimes fall into.
And then it's just not for the day. You're talking about building a program or building good habits that ensure that you have a long, resilient career.
Yeah.
That you can meet the demands, correct?
100%. Yeah.
What typically works when you're kind of rolling out if a company or an individual kind of works, an informal or formal approach towards a mobility program?
Yeah, so we actually partnered with this group out of Colorado to look at the research, because I would say that there was a lot of trial and error in the first, few years of doing this. Like, man, how do we make something that's sticky, that really is impactful and continues to grow so that it becomes part of the culture? And I mean, there was a lot of, learning during that period, but basically we've boiled it down to, there are 3 aspects that really drive long-term engagement. Number 1 is upper management engagement and the middle management engagement. So like at the executive level, when they're like, man, this is a priority, we're going to give our team the tools, resources, we're going to support this. This is part of our culture and our mission and who we are. And then the middle management, there are people who, maybe a supervisor who are overseeing a crew. So them also being supportive of that and saying, hey, this is a priority before we go out for the day, or before, once we get out to the site, we're going to do a couple things to make sure that we're ready to go and we're ready to perform. So number 1 is leadership buy-in. Number 2 is that it's integrated into the infrastructure, because, I mean, let's face it, every utility, they're so busy. There's like 10 times more work to be done than we actually have time to perform. And so anything that takes away from that productivity oftentimes falls by the wayside. So, how can you ensure that just by showing up to work, people are, number 1, like it's just part of going to work, like part of the tailboard of the pre-job briefing. It's like, that you're going to spend 3 to 5 minutes rolling out your muscles or doing a dynamic warm-up to prepare for that activity. Or we're continuing to educate people, like 2 minutes here, 2 minutes there, that teach people about body position or the impact of dehydration on the way that their brain functions or the way that their muscles function. Because when people have that knowledge, it really does drive behavior change. If people don't understand the bigger picture, they're not going to make a change, and they're not going to be incented to. So continuing to integrate and educate the workforce is step number 2. And then number 3 is that there's a new employee onboarding program where just by joining this company, they're exposed to, hey, this is how we approach preventing these type of injuries and how we take care of our workforce, so that's somebody's first experience in joining that company. And so that the sustainability is built in, because, I mean, sprain and strain or soft tissue injuries make up 40 to 60% of all injuries with a utility company. And so it's like, this is the low-hanging fruit. If we can just give people a little bit of framework, you can shift the needle pretty drastically just by a focused approach to this issue.
What does that time loss look like for a company when you got talking about 40, 60% of injuries looking like a sprain and strain?
Yeah. I mean, what OSHA tells us is that the average sprain strain injury requires about 13 days away from work. So it's either days away or loss or restricted time. So, I mean, you start to multiply that, especially if you're an organization of, let's say, 3,000 people. That can be pretty impactful from a productive standpoint.
So would you say with a movement health program with a fundamental knowledge of how to your body works and building resilience in your body, you're working towards preventing those injuries. Is that kind of how that works?
Yeah. Yeah. And like for us, we're pretty insane about looking at injury statistics with our customers to make sure that we're heading in the right direction. And I mean, the thing that compelled me to retire from sports medicine, sell my clinic, like do all that stuff is because in that first year of doing that pilot with that utility company, they dropped their soft tissue injury rate by 53% in 1 year. And then we got like all this feedback from people just in terms of like the impact that had on their quality of life. And then the CEO of that company started telling other utilities. So pretty soon we had customers in Florida and Oklahoma, and we were seeing the exact same results. And I'm like, man, I could spend the next 30 years working with patients one-on-one in my clinic, or we could work with tens of thousands of people across, this country and really have a profound impact on the way, people move and feel, the impact on the businesses. And I always say that like a soft tissue injury, they oftentimes don't fall into that SIF category, like serious injury and fatality. But from my perspective, just being in this, is that I do think that these soft tissue injuries can actually be life-altering injuries. I mean, I've seen so many people over the course of my career who have a back issue, and it impacts the rest of their life. And so, man, if we can give people those tools so that they understand how to maintain their bodies, they don't have to go down that same path. And so I'm so motivated every day. And I think a lot of that goes back to a story with my grandpa. I'm like, I saw someone who was super close to me stop living at a pretty young age because they were just so impacted by the stress and strain that was placed on their body every day at work. And it doesn't have to be that way. And so to me, this is like a huge opportunity to impact people.
Absolutely. I think you bring a lot of good points when you talk about serious injury fatality, like identifying those, but understanding that if you have an injured shoulder and you're performing a task or a procedure, you might compensate that task because of the injured shoulder or that achy back that could lead you into a poor work habit that leads to a serious injury fatality.
Sure. Yeah, no, I mean, things can unwind pretty quickly. And, we know that even just being in pain, like not even talking about movement, but when people are in pain, it physiologically changes the way that their brain functions. And we start to shift into more of that like fight or flight mode rather than, being calm. And so we'll start to make different decisions. We'll start to take shortcuts. We'll start to, almost become tunnel vision so that we're less aware of hazards that are around us. And so I do think that there's actually a pretty strong correlation between this movement health aspect, pain, and people's ability to be safe on the job, and also, their coworkers being safe.
Yeah, that's great. How do you take inventory of your body? How do you kind of manage that? Like if it's just me standing there taking inventory of my pain level, what's that kind of look like?
Yeah. So, oftentimes we talk about like taking a 360 walk around of your vehicle before you do work, or take a 360 walk around of your tool, evaluate it, make sure it's ready to go. But one of the things that we teach people is like, take a 360 walk around of your body, like take inventory, like start from the feet and go on the way up. And, if you've got an area that's tight and sore, like address it. And so like with our program, we have app, we've got tools, things like that allow people, if they have a tight shoulder or tight lower back, they can just select that area of their body and it shows them what they need to do to work that area out. But again, it's teaching people these life skills of how to problem solve stuff in the earliest stages rather than just saying, oh, I just hope it goes away, or this is just part of the job. What I always found in my clinic, my goal was always, I would tell people, my goal is not to see you. If I'm not seeing you, I'm doing my job.
Yeah.
And so like every interaction, I was focused on, how can I give this people one or two things that they can use on their own so that because we're all going to wake up with a tight neck. We're all going to wake up with a tight lower back, but the power is in having the knowledge to be like, okay, my back's tight. I understand how my body works a little bit better. I can use this, ball to roll out this muscle. I can do these motions. I can, engage my core and do these breathing exercises. And you can oftentimes ratchet that pain down to the point where it starts to put the body in a position where it can start to heal and recover. The body's amazing at healing and recovering. We just oftentimes don't put it in the best position to be able to actually do that.
Good point.
One other thing that I will say, going back to when I mentioned that we did the functional movement screens, we actually did like over 6,000 functional movement screens on industrial athletes over a couple year period. And the functional movement screen it's kind of like the gold standard for a movement assessment. So you look at 7 different movements. You look at like shoulder mobility, back mobility, hip mobility, things like that. And so we took about 1,500 people. We took them through the functional movement screen. These were all utility workers. And then we gave them a very simple program. So like rolling their muscles, focus on diaphragmatic breathing, and then dynamic movements. And we targeted the areas of their body that, maybe were restricted. So if they had shoulder mobility, they'd focus on a program that was a little bit more focused for the shoulder. We then came back 10 weeks later and we retested those people. And on average, people did that routine about 3 days per week. But what was pretty cool is that the group in the 60-plus-year-old category, when we retested them, they tested better than the 40-year-olds did at their onset. And that was huge because what it showed us is that, so many people live in this mindset of like, I'm just getting older, or, this is part of the job, or I can never get better. And I mean, for us, it was like, we have empirical evidence that shows that actually you can make a difference. You can, reduce those mobility restrictions, and it doesn't have to be that way. And so it was a really powerful, I think, testimony of, it doesn't take exercise. It doesn't take all this stuff that's going to take a lot of time. It's just like really simple things on a consistent basis can have a profound impact on the way that people move and feel.
Do you think, I think being young, that mindset is like, nothing really hurts. I'm going to feel this way forever. And then maybe to your point, your studies showed that the 60-year-olds maybe had a different approach where it's like, I am at the end of my career and I'm trying to feel the best that I can possibly can. So I'm going to have a different mindset. Is that, you think that was part of it or no?
No, I just think that, I think up to that point, they were just like, oh, this is just the way that it is. But what's interesting is when they did the functional movement screen, I think it was an eye-opening experience for them because, it challenges your balance. It challenges your ability to like step and do different things. And so I think for a lot of people, it's like you don't oftentimes know how restricted you are until you actually put yourself in a position where you're testing yourself. And so like one of the moves is like you have a bar over your shoulder and you step over this wire, and the wire's, about as high as your knee. And so it's amazing how simple of a task is, but how few people can actually do that with stability. And then you start correlating it to, this height is actually about the height of a bathtub. So you're 60 years old and you're having trouble getting in and out of a bathtub. You start putting things in context and people are like, man, I remember my dad or my mom, by the time they got 60, 70 years old, like it was hard for them to move. I don't want to end up that way. And so I think for a lot of people, the nice part about it is it sets a baseline and it gives them that motivation of saying, man, I want my life to look different than the people around me as I age. And I mean, I still remember my grandma had to put the socks on my grandpa, like, towards the end of his life. And he was like 65, 67 years old. I mean, you should be able to put your socks on. But for a lot of people, if you don't use it, if you don't challenge it, if you don't work on it, you do lose your mobility. And mobility is key to so many other areas of our life from a quality perspective.
But when you talk about that as a lineman or as a construction, any utility, you're moving, you're using your muscles. What's the stark difference of actually being intentional with the program?
Well, again, going back to, I think, work with athletes always tell you that recovery is more important than the training, because if you just train, but don't focus on recovery, you're going to start to fall into a breakdown mode. So every athlete was like insane about their recovery. Most of the workforce, again, this is just observational.
Sure.
They work, but when it comes to recovery, there's not a lot happening. And so it's just that cumulative effect. So I'm a strong believer that, if you are moving well, you're putting your body in the strongest position when you're performing your job tasks, it's an opportunity to actually make your body stronger rather than breaking down. So like if I'm an athlete in a gym, I'm going to be more focused on the way that I'm lifting the weights and putting myself in the strongest position versus the amount of weight that I'm lifting. Because the only way that my body gets stronger is if I'm leveraging the right muscles, I'm moving in the right way. But again, for the workforce, what we found, especially doing like some of the functional movement screens early on, is that a lot of basic movements, people physically could not get their body in the right position. So if I can't get my body in the right position, but I'm working 10 to 14 hours a day, that means I'm increasing the stress that's being placed on my body. So it's kind of like, I mean, here's a great example. You see like somebody with restricted shoulder mobility in their overhead worker. If I can't lift my shoulder up high, I'm going to rotate my lower back to try to compensate. And so without knowing it, I'm putting more stress on another area of my body. And that's breaking me down. So again, I think we're talking less about exercise, because if you tell a lineman who works 14 hours a day, you need to go and exercise, they're like, I just spent 14 hours moving all day long. I don't want to do that. So that's where there's the difference between exercise and moving, but mobility is really focusing on getting your body to move the way that it was designed to move.
Good point. Take us through a muscle knot. I know there's going to be a way to approach a muscle knot, whether to stretch or to roll out. Can you walk us through that?
Yeah. So what's fascinating about the body is like it's completely connected. So like from the bottom of my foot all the way up the back of my leg, back of my spine, all the way to the base of my skull, it's one continuous piece of tissue. So think about it like my shirt. My shirt's probably like 5 or 6 different pieces of fabric that are sewn together that give me the arms, the body, things like that. That's the way that the muscles are put together. And within each layer of muscle, there's what's called fascia, or connective tissue. And so the connective tissue is what binds everything together. It's even in our abdominal organs, like everything's connected through fascia. And so what can happen is if we are chronically overusing a muscle, or maybe we have an injury, the muscle will get damaged and the body will repair itself by laying down basically what we call myofascial adhesion. So it's a network of muscle tissue plus that fascia. And so that's what forms a knot. And I think we all can appreciate like what a knot feels like. I mean, just feel at the top of your shoulder and it's like, okay, that's a muscle knot. Muscle knots are actually a good thing to a certain perspective, because it's reinforcing an area that's been injured and damaged. But what it will do is over time, it will start to shorten the length of that muscle. And so like, let's say I strain my hamstring. The hamstring is on the back of the leg. It attaches to the pelvis. So if I have one of my hamstrings is shorter than the other, every time I take a step, every time I bend down, there's an uneven pull on my pelvis because one side is shorter than the other. And so like one of the most common causes of lower back pain is actually a problem with the hamstring, and you have those myofascial adhesions. And so if you think about it, like if I have a knot in a rope, or tie a knot in a rope, that rope is going to get shorter.
Absolutely.
But if I pull on it, that knot's not going away. So what we've traditionally taught people is that you should just stretch out your muscles if they're tight.
Absolutely.
But what all the research is showing is that actually probably what it's doing is it's probably pulling on the tendons that attach to the pelvis and attach to the back of the knee. I mean, here's a classic example of doing this type of stretch at the start of the day. I mean, all of us have probably done that stretch, but if I've used my muscles for 30 years, wrenching, grasping, doing all those things, I probably have a lot of myofascial adhesions in my form. So when I do this stretch, I'm probably pulling on the tendons, and I'm actually putting myself more at risk for like tendonitis or things like that. So we actually brought the roller. So, I mean, what you can like literally do in that situation is actually roll out the muscle. And what all the research shows is that it increases the blood supply to that muscle, increases oxygen. It starts to realign the fibers where that myofascial adhesion have occurred. And when those fibers are more aligned, it increases the flexibility. So instantaneously, I can increase the flexibility of that muscle, and I can heat it up, I can warm it up without ever having to put it on stretch. And so again, what an athlete is going to focus on is that they're going to focus on rolling first, because then you can get those muscles warmed up, not put it on stretch. It's not that stretching is bad. I still stretch. I do it at the end of the day. I do it after rolling. It's just that the order that we teach people is probably improper. So like with the workforce athletes that we work with, I mean, everyone gets a roller. They carry it in their truck with them. They get like a lacrosse ball type thing on a rope. And so that they can really target those areas where the muscles have become tight and sore. And it's pretty cool because people feel instantly better. They have better flexibility, and it's just one tool that they can use to fine tune their body or impact an area that's tight that they can't stretch out, and so that it prevents that cycle of then just them working through it and hoping it goes away and then having it turn into a compensation injury.
And you're releasing those good endorphins, right?
Totally,
100%. Some good dopamine.
Good dopamine.
So you're gonna feel good. You're gonna actually physically and mentally feel a little bit better, right?
Totally, 100%.
That's cool.
Yeah.
All right, something you guys kind of talk about with your company. We'll get into a little bit later, but rolling, breathing, and moving.
Yep.
So what's that kind of look like? I'm walking up to a pole. I got my tools on, and what's kind of the process that you kind of recommend there?
Yeah, for sure. So again, we've got to be practical. I mean, people can't spend 20 minutes they get to a job site, but oftentimes the way that we approach it is that at the start of the day, people spend 5 minutes doing that rolling, breathing, and moving, and I'll explain a little bit why. But oftentimes the dynamic is then people jump in their trucks, they drive 45 minutes to a job site, they're sitting in traffic, and then they go to perform a job task, and their body's like shut down again. It's cold. So it's like, I personally think the best thing to do is to just spend like 2 minutes just preparing your body for that activity. So a little bit about breathing. So breathing, like we oftentimes think about like our strength of our core being related to like if we have a six pack, like do we have those abdominal organs or abdominal muscles working? But really the core of our core is our ability to engage our diaphragm in our pelvic floor and create pressure in our core that supports our spine. So Paul, you can do this. You can kind of take a breath in, push down, and you can feel when you tighten, that's creating that stability.
Right.
A lot of us go through life and we never engage those muscles at all. And so what will happen is that there's this whole mechanism in the brain where if we're getting ready to perform a task, if we train that cycle, our brain will automatically engage those muscles so that we get that stiffening of our spine, so that when we're performing a task, we have a strong core, because that core is where all of our force and our strength comes from. But for people who don't work on that and they don't engage their those muscles, then they don't have that same level of pressure. And you and I were talking about this earlier. It's kind of like you have a full water bottle, and when you push down on that water bottle, it's rock solid. But if you take a little bit of that water out and you try to push down on it, it's just floppy. And so if I can't engage my core, if I can't create that pressure, it puts all the stress on the ligaments of my spine, the discs of my spine. And so that's when people blow out discs, like bending down to pick a wrench up off the ground. Their brain connection with their core muscles is not working. So that's number one. Number two is the movement, the dynamic movement. So doing movements with your body that are going to mimic the type of work that you're going to be doing. So if you're going to be climbing a pole, it's getting your hip joints moving. And so it's taking your body through a range of motion. It's getting your shoulders moving so that you can get ready to do that type of a dynamic movement. And the way that I think about it is it's like a batter in a batter's box. I mean, they did a warm-up at the start of the game, but then every time they go up to go to bat, they use a weighted bat in the on-deck circle, and they take a few cuts. And what they're really doing more than anything is they're getting all their muscles, their joints ready to perform that movement. But neurologically, they're telling their brain that I'm about ready to do this motion. And so start to prepare for that type of activity. And the body's way more efficient when we prepare it for that type of an activity. And we're a lot safer because our body is, stronger. It's the muscles are firing better neurologically. We're more prepared to perform that task. So I know it's pretty deep level, but roll, breathe, move is easy to remember, and it's pretty simple. It takes like 3 to 5 minutes to do, but scientifically, it's the best way to prepare your body for that activity.
And I think most of us could probably acknowledge that we've learned about stretching or rolling at some capacity, but then you kind of implement that breathing, and you're just talking about like strengthening your diaphragm and what that does and how that could help you perform better, like, and actually just being a part of your everyday routine, just being stronger, building a better diaphragm. Like it's something that gets stronger when you exercise it, correct?
Yeah. Try this, Paul. Maybe your listeners can do this when they're listening. Sit up nice and tall and take a big breath in through your nose and then out. And now go ahead and kind of slouch down. And now try to take a big breath in.
Yes.
Yeah, you can't do it.
Yeah.
So your rib cage mechanically locks down when you're just slightly slouched forward. And so we can't get that expansion of our rib cage. Our diaphragm can't engage. And we breathe 20,000 times every day. So if you think about most of the activities that we do every day, we're sitting behind a steering wheel, we're sitting behind a computer, we're texting, we're working out in front of us. Everything in our day pulls us into that rounded forward position. Our rib cage gets locked down. So for most of us, we're just, repetition after repetition, we're not engaging our diaphragm. And then we go to do a physical task and neurologically our body's just not synced up. And so it's one of those things that you have to like be intentional about preparing your body for that type of activity. Because I'll tell you what, I look at injury data like every single day for companies, and like I cannot tell you how many of the injuries it's like technician bent down to pick a wrench up off the ground, herniated a disc in their lower back. Technician stepped off a curb, tore his MCL. It's like those type of things should not happen. It's because of the capacity of that individual. Their body's not prepared to perform that task. And a lot of times these are very strong people, but neurologically things aren't firing in the right way so that they can engage the muscles at the right time and the right muscles at the right time to have the strength and durability to perform those tasks. I mean, the big thing that I have focused on with athletes is creating basically durability or creating resilience in the athlete, which means their body can take on more with less impact on them. But if we aren't working on creating a more durable body, then, simple tasks will be things that can create big injuries.
So you would say it's not even completing those complex tasks. You're just talking about bending over, stepping up, a grade change. Like these are tasks that are done routinely within the job, but the lack of resiliency in that body performing the task just kind of falls to the wayside, right?
Yeah. And so I'll get deep with you on one more concept.
Come on, man, bring it. We're
ready. We call it the above and below principle, okay? So put your ankle out in front of you and kind of twirl your ankle around, right?
Oh, that feels good.
That's a mobile joint, okay? Bend your knee back and forth, okay? That's a hinge joint. Yep. It's a stable joint. If we go up to our hip is a ball and socket, moves through a full range of motion. Then we get up to our lumbar spine, and it's a stable joint. And then up above, we have our thoracic spine. That's actually a mobile area of the body. Again, 20,000 times a day, we should be like getting that movement and that contraction and expansion of our rib cage. And so there's this concept called the above and below principle. So if I have two areas that are supposed to be mobile that are not moving well, I'm going to compensate in between. So if my upper back is tight and my hips are tight, those are both supposed to move really, really well. So if they're restricted, then I'm going to start to overbend in my lumbar spine to try to compensate for the lack of mobility down below. So I start to chip away at my stability. Think about a paper clip. You can only bend it so many times back and forth before it breaks.
Absolutely.
And so if I have poor mobility, and you probably have done a hip hinge before, you know what a deadlift motion is. Like if I can't move in my hips that way, and so I'm bending with my lower back, I can only do that so many times before bending down to pick a wrench up off the ground is that straw that breaks the camel's back, and then my back goes out. So it has little to do with that activity and just more chronically moving, not the way that our body was designed to move. And so the way to break that cycle is to focus on getting the joints that are supposed to move well, actually moving well, so your hip and your upper back, working on your core stability through diaphragmatic breathing, and then loosening up the muscles above and below that area so that it allows those joints to move freer. And again, that's the real cause of why those type of injuries happen. It's not just, the task itself, because, oftentimes you read a report and it's like, oh, a technician, again, picked up a wrench and the back went out. And so then they, the response is, okay, we should have everyone take a course on, how to bend properly to lift wrenches off the ground, which is like, that wasn't it. Like we got to teach people like how to get their bodies more durable and actually moving in the right way. And then those type of tasks should not lead to those type of injuries.
Because that's an everyday task that you should have built that resilience should be there to perform that task.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's such a critical part of the work requirement is
Absolutely.
having that durability. Yeah.
Absolutely. Let's go into that then. What can you tell us about body positioning, those kind of ergonomics? And line work is probably the worst example ever because it's the most uncomfortable. You're putting a heavy belt on.
Yeah.
You're climbing. You're reaching out. You're making terminations on a arm. House services. You're out there. The kind of joke is if it hurts, you're doing it right, meaning you're in the right position and your abdomen's tight or your obliques cramping up. Then you go into bucket and you're kind of you're trying to put yourself in a position that best serves you, but it's not always the right position. You're working in around big heavy trucks that you got to lean into, pull some stuff out of. Tell me about all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Well, first of all, like, man, I was so ignorant of what was actually required to make sure that when I hit the light switch, I actually had power. Like, this has been one of the most educational experiences in my life, and I have like absolute respect for the linemen and the electricians out there who do this type of work. Like, it's unbelievable. And like when the power goes out, it's never favorable conditions outside. It's miserable. And so, and yeah, I just want to lead in by saying this has been incredible to actually see what is actually required of that. I think what I've observed as I've been out with crews and I've watched the work that they do is that it is really tough to get into good body positioning a lot of the time. I mean, just the positions that you're required to because of the limitations of, space being up in a bucket or, having to reach out and you're on a pole. Like, it's really, really tough. But what I always tell people is there are 3 things to keep in mind. So talking about a checklist, think about the position of your base. So that's like, in some cases it's your feet. Some other cases it's your knees if you're kneeling, but it's the position of your base because that's you being rooted into the ground so that you have that stable base. I mean, think about a tree with like a deep root system versus a tree with a really shallow root system. The wind comes, like that shallow root system, the tree's going to topple over. And so you want to think about yourself being rooted into the ground with a really strong base. And there, sometimes where you want to have one foot in front of the other, we call that a staggered stance versus your feet are symmetrical. So it's dependent on the type of work that you're doing and the position of the work that you're doing. Number 2 is the position of your trunk. So again, thinking, am I twisted? Am I, keeping a flat spine? Am I hinging through the hips? Am I in that strong position? And so we call it the prime position, but if you think of the position of a shortstop, somebody who's playing defense on a basketball team, a linebacker position, a safety position, like all of them get in the exact same starting position when they're getting ready to for a play. We call that the prime position or the ready position. So thinking about, again, that position of the base, the trunk, and then the position of the shoulders is critical. That's your checklist, because if you can be strong and rooted in those 3 positions, you can, even in those awkward moments, you can, position your body at least in the strongest position possible so that you can reduce the stress that's being placed on your body. But then it also goes back to, as much as feasibly possible, trying to take breaks every once in a while. I mean, a sustained muscle contraction, like being in an awkward position for a long time, puts a lot of strain on the muscles. That's one of the more taxing tasks. And so, again, just thinking about if this is going to be a job that I'm going to be doing for 4 hours, you got to pace it to reduce that stress on your body. But yeah, base, trunk, and shoulders. That's what I always tell people.
Yeah, that was always fun seeing how many services you can connect, leaning out in the arm and then coming back in, regathering, taking those deep breaths and get back out there to finish the job. So that's always kind of cool.
Yeah.
And it's always kind of like with your pull partners of the pole, so you can kind of go the longest without having to adjust their feet or leaning out. So it's kind of fun.
Yeah.
You called prime position. What'd you call it?
I call it the prime position.
Is that the same as the power zone?
Yeah. Well, power zone is more like where you're working.
There you go. Talk about that, please.
Yeah. So that's the other thing too. I mean, think about holding, a 20-pound weight. If I hold it close to my body, pretty simple. Like everything is close to my center of gravity, but every inch that I get away from my body, it puts exponential amount of stress and strain especially on my lower back, because my center of gravity is basically where my belly button is. And so all that force is being focused like on my lower back. So Paul, you and I at the start were talking about like putting an extension like on a wrench. If you increase that lever arm, it takes less force for you to, exert more, or less, force to exert more tension on that nut or whatever you're trying to crack.
Yeah.
But the further we get away from our bodies, it's just going to exponentially increase the amount of strain on our back. So again, keeping things in the power zone is critical.
What's your advice for anyone who can naturally think less of kind of like these functions and the implementation? They don't necessarily believe in working out, or they don't think they have that kind of discipline to prioritize movement health. What's kind of your advice for that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the thing is, at the end of the day, if you don't want to focus on movement health, I mean, at the very minimum, like you can also focus on the recovery aspect. I mean, like hydration, nutrition, sleep, recovery, all those things, again, don't require a ton of effort. A lot of it is just decision making, you know what I mean? But we know that muscles that are even 2% dehydrated, they're going to be at a higher risk for an injury. You're going to be more stiff and sore. You can't flush out all the toxins in your body that are formed through like exertion, lactic acid, things like that. We know that, being even slightly dehydrated changes the way that your brain functions. So you're not going to think as clearly. And so if you don't want to focus on these physical aspects of movement health, I mean, there are ways, even the food that we can either increase inflammation, put us at higher risk for an injury and pain, or, we can make choices that are going to give the body the nutrients it needs to actually heal and recover better. So I don't know if I'm answering your question there, Paul, but is that kind of along the lines of what you're...
Absolutely. It's a loaded question. There's no right answer. I'm just trying to challenge you and see what we can kind of pull from you. But yeah, that totally fits the answer for absolutely. You and I kind of talked about implementing a movement health, or just kind of taking care of yourself with some of these protocols you've talked about. How it sets a standard or expectation for yourself. And one of my favorite things when working as a lineman is to have the apprentice go up in the air and work, do what's in their capacity of their job, the scope of their job. And they do a great job, clean, quality work. But then you go to their trailer and it's a complete mess. It's disorganized. And the conversation was always like, how can you you see the importance of doing your work at a quality standard that's high there, but then you disregard your standard when you get to the trailer or inside your truck. So it's kind of like that saying that says, how you do anything is how you do everything. Mm-hmm. So I think there's a intimacy or like a connection between taking care of your body at a certain standard and performing some of these movements, set that standard for what everything else you do.
Yeah.
Make sense kind of?
Totally. Yeah. And yeah, it is a little bit of a loaded question, but I think that some of this goes back to even just how people value themselves. Like one of the things that I say in almost the end of every video that we produce is you're worth investing in.
Sure.
And I mean, here's the reality is like when we are in pain, we can't be the best versions of ourselves. I mean, pain impacts, everything about us. Like we get short-tempered and like we just can't think clearly. We're more irritated. It's kind of like being hangry. You know what I mean? It's like you can't be the best version of yourself. And I mean, I try to reiterate to every person, like you're a gift to this world, like bring your best self to it. And, you can optimize who you are. And so I think that the way that, even people take care of their bodies, like oftentimes people will take better care of their vehicles and their tools than their own body. And so, I mean, our hope is that, as we walk with people through their journey of learning more about this and thinking about, setting up a plan for themselves, that they see themselves as being worth investing in because they're a gift to this world and they have things to give and they'll be the best version of themselves when they're taking care of themselves, their bodies.
Yeah, absolutely. And I hope the goal, I didn't come off as the goal being Mr. Olympia or,
Yeah.
what that looks like, but it's just implementing a procedure or some type of protocols to get you on a path that you're feeling better and things are feeling good. So,
Yeah.
All right. Performance coach, Jason, you have to help me with this last name.
Bacigalupo.
There we go.
Yeah.
I had a conversation with him on LinkedIn, and he wanted me to talk about the importance of not only a pre-shift warm-up, but also the end of the day muscle care.
Yeah.
What's kind of your speech on that?
Yeah. Again,
How'd you say his last name too?
Bacigalupo.
Oh, man.
Yeah. He's fantastic. He's one of our performance coaches. Love the guy. But yeah. So again, recovery at the end of the day, I mentioned that, the recovery is just as important as anything that you do during the day. So, I mean, recovery looks different for some people. It's, sitting around while they're watching TV with their family and, you're rolling your legs out, you're rolling your muscles out, and you're stimulating, blood flow, oxygen to the tissue so that, you can wake up the next morning feeling better. But I think it also goes back to, what are the other things that you're doing? So making sure you're fueling your body with the right nutrition so that it actually can recover. I mean, it's amazing when you give your body the stuff that it needs, it does amazing things with it, and it can heal and recover a lot of that stuff. But unfortunately, a lot of the food that we have in our society, it's not nutritious. Like it creates inflammation, which then prevents recovery from happening. So I oftentimes say that, fueling your recovery and hydrating your recovery are two of the most important things that you can do. And then obviously, the sleep aspect. I mean, that's when our body is going through, it's a whole recovery phase. I know, like with my Whoop band, it's one of those things, like I've completely changed so many of my habits. Like I know that if I have any sugar past about 6 p.m., the quality of my sleep and my recovery goes way down. I don't drink a lot, but if I even have one beer, like my recovery will be at like in the red. I'll be like 30%. And so I'm like, it's just not worth it. Like
Sure.
I've got too much other stuff that I want to do.
50K.
Yeah. To like have a 30% recovery, that's not worth it. And so I think that sometimes data helps you make better decisions that help, cause you to be in a better spot. So it does take intention. I mean, you have to be thoughtful about those things, but I think that the information and the data, can help support those decisions for sure.
Absolutely. All right. I kind of want to talk about something that we kind of utilize at Sturgis, California, and I want to get your take on it, is the relationship between the energy wheel and movement health. What do you got on that?
Yeah. No, I'm super grateful for there are several people in the industry. Matt Hollowell, I don't know if you know Dr. Matt Hollowell. He's the CRSA, so Construction Research Safety Alliance out in Colorado. They've done some amazing things that really bring these concepts to the table, along with EEI. So I want to give credit where credit's due, but the whole concept is that serious injuries and fatalities have not really changed. Like we haven't been shifting the needle. Those continue to be things that impact, companies and obviously lives. And so the whole goal is getting people home safely. The energy wheel is a framework that gives people the ability to evaluate a job site and say, okay, here are all the high energy hazards that are present. And so here's how we're going to go about our work today so that we don't put ourselves essentially in line with fire of high energy situations. And so there are a bunch of different things like electricity, gravity, mechanical forces. And so when we're thinking about the energy wheel in the human body, there's not currently in the model, there's not a strong connection between musculoskeletal injuries and serious injuries and fatalities. But where I see there being a connection is that, again, it goes back to this fact that really the human is at the center of the energy wheel. I mean, they're the one who is performing the pre-job evaluation. They're looking for the hazards. They're identifying the risks that are present. And so if I go to a job, I'm in pain, like I have tunnel vision, it's harder for me to identify hazards and those different situations. And so I'm not going to perform that task at the highest level. I also know that, gravitational forces, mechanical forces, motion, those are all things that also put me at risk for developing, a sprain strain injury. So being aware of how those type of energy hazards also relate to me is something that's important. And then I have to make sure that my body's actually prepared to go and actually perform that task. Because if I'm not ready, I'm going to put myself and the rest of the team at risk for something actually failing.
Cool. Absolutely. Yeah. Energy wheel is great. I got the little diagram here. Yeah. It's a great little tool. We utilize it on our tailboards. It's any type of hazard can be identified with one of these energy wheel parameters, and it's a good tool. And I'm glad you guys are implementing and kind of making that comparison too. So it fits right into pocket.
Yeah. And again, that whole framework goes back to, it's also called the capacity model. So thinking about creating capacity in a situation so that, one of the principles is that we're all fallible, that we all can make mistakes. And so if we do make mistakes, we put the safeguards in place so that failure can happen safely and that we don't injure people or people don't get killed. But going back to our earlier conversation about building capacity in the individual, an injury happens when the energy force is greater than the person's capacity. So the load is greater than the capacity. That's when failure happens to the human. And so by increasing people's capacity and durability, they can handle more stress, load, energy from a physical perspective with less impact on their body. So that's the other connection there, is where I think we can really help people become more durable for those type of work situations.
Absolutely. Kind of want to talk about something you touched on a little bit. We touched on a little bit, but emotional wellness directly tied to physical health. I think we look at the construction industry and the utility industry. You see a high industry that's kind of filled with prescriptive opioids, maybe a coping skills of abusing alcohol, or just different habits that could lead towards other problems. Once again, can you kind of reiterate that how that physical health plays into that mental health?
Yeah, and again, I think we've done surveys of like over 1,000 linemen, and what we find is when we ask them, like, do you experience pain on a regular basis? Like anywhere between 45 and 80% of the time we ask that question, people are like, yeah, I experience pain 4 out of 10, at least 3 times a week. Like, it's extremely common. And so I think it's just acknowledging that, a big chunk of the population is in pain, but we're not necessarily giving people the tools on how they can deal with that. And, again, we live in a society that, going back to that fire alarm analogy, I mean, we just try to deaden the signal. So we'll do ibuprofen, and that's like the starting point. And then it turns into, a 6-pack of beer, and then it turns to opioids. I mean, unfortunately, that's what we're seeing a lot in the industry right now. And it's, from my perspective, it's just absolutely tragic that, someone should, work hard every day, put their body on the line, but then not be able to, deal with that. And again, there's so many different components, but I do think that pain does play a role in this whole thing. So it may not be a situation that's going to fix everything, but if we can help support people from a pain perspective, from a movement health perspective, I think it really can have a profound impact in terms of, people's overall well-being, for sure.
Absolutely. Well said. I want to pull a reading from Your Brain Weighs 500 Pounds by Derek Pledger. It's not a cover to cover read. It's a book you kind of just pull through and like daily devotional kind of reading, but pretty good page right here I wanted to read. It says, recipe 65, being interested is not being committed. The 1972 Miami Dolphins are the only NFL team to go undefeated over an entire season. That team's commitment to winning the Super Bowl and commitment to each other is legendary. Skipping down a little bit. It says, the lesson here is simple. You are kidding yourself and your desired outcomes, you are kidding yourself if your desired outcomes are just thoughts or words on paper. Thoughts or words on paper show you that you are more interested than you are committed. Commitment means taking deliberate action to move towards your goals. without full commitment, your life goals will remain elusive. Kevin, how committed do you have to be to yourself just to kind of implement some of these habits, some of these protocols, some of these procedures?
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. It's like a huge continuum, and I think oftentimes in society we put so much pressure on people to be these like ultra high achievers, and you set goals that are so high that then you're like, I'm failed again. Like I'm off the wagon. Why even do this? But like that's where I'm like, man, if people just did like a great starting point. We talked about this earlier. 3 days a week for 5 minutes, you invest in your movement health just by doing simple stuff like rolling, breathing, and moving. You can have a pretty profound impact in terms of just the way that you move and feel. Hey, that's check the box. That's a great starting point. Then it gives you that fuel to say, okay, I'm going to move up to 5 days per week. And you just start to make it part of your routine. I mean, Paul, how often do you brush your teeth?
Twice a day.
Twice a day. Yeah. Every day. Right.
Sorry. Yeah.
Yeah. And so it's like one of those things, like we just don't think about our movement health the same as we do our oral health. So it's like if we could give ourselves just a couple minutes and we start to make it part of a habit. I mean, that's a great starting point. And then you might say, you know what, I'm going to bump it up a notch. I'm going to, just focus on drinking an extra 32 ounces of water per day. And all of a sudden it's like, okay, we know statistically you're actually improving so many areas of how your body functions physiologically. Awesome. Next step. And then 2 weeks later, it's like, okay, I'm going to try to reduce one, Monster Energy drink and cut down on my sugar. And I'm going to, eat 2 more vegetables. It's just like, it doesn't have to be these major things. And I'm not dogging on Monster Energy drinks. I'm just saying that it's like, if sugar is what you're putting in your body, I mean, that's calories that are replacing maybe better foods that are going to be anti-inflammatory to your body. So it's just stuff that we have to be thinking about. And again, if we can just help people nudge them in the right direction, it feels way less of this, like I either am all in or all out, and I'm either successful or a failure. So I think it's the small changes over time that really have the biggest impact.
Absolutely. Very cool. I want to challenge you again here. I was reading a book by Dr. Peter Attia. It's called Outlive. Mm-hmm. He talks about medicine 1.0 being penicillin, antibiotics, medicine 2.0 being quality of life and life extension with prescription drugs for cancer, for heart disease. And then he talks about medicine 3.0 being disease-free. Mm-hmm. So if we were to say movement health 1.0 is living a life of pain, medicine 2.0 is implementing roll, breathe, movement techniques and protocols into your life. What does movement health 3.0 look like?
Yeah. By the way, that's a great book. Yeah. Like one of my favorite books. I think he's just spot on with that. And so I think movement health 3.0, that really gets into those lifestyle factors where you're really being intentional about the things that you're eating, things that you're drinking, the recovery aspects. I mean, it's probably doing cold plunges and saunas. It's, getting pre-screened for different, health conditions that you can maybe, fine tune through different aspects of healthy behavior, or, it could be supplements that are going to, give your body the right collagen it needs to heal. So I think it's taking that next step of saying, okay, now I'm going to get way more preventative, way more in front of it. I'm going to start doing things that, are less reactive to like pain or symptoms, and more, I know that these are healthy behaviors that are going to set me up for success long term.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Cool. We're going to shift right now, but I wanted to cover 3 takeaways. I know to the audience, this is a pretty information-heavy podcast, and I know we want to break it down. So if you can give the listeners 3 takeaways from that conversation we just had, what would they be?
Yeah, I think it goes back to a couple different things. So like number one, like the bar is pretty low in terms of things that we can do to take care of our muscle health. And, we talked about rolling, breathing, and moving is a great starting point. So that's like step one. Number two is, again, thinking about the way that we perform our daily tasks so that we're reducing unneeded stress on our body. So we talked about like prime position. We talked about, power zone. And so like for people who are, on the job, thinking about like how they're performing those job tasks, I think is number two. Number three is, this recovery aspect. Like what are simple things that you can do that would just be like a first step in the right direction to optimize your recovery? Because at the end of the day, that's how we start to break the cycle of breakdown, and we can actually encourage building up rather than just avoiding breakdown.
Cool. Well said. Good stuff. You might have to go back, listen to a little bit more again, and just kind of refresh that. That was all good stuff. I'm passionate about it. I know a lot of people in the industry are too. So good stuff, Kevin. All right, let's shift. Not only are you passionate about providing some of this information to the power utility industry, to other industries, but you're co-founder of a company. If you can you talk about Vimocity?
Yeah, so Vimocity, my wife and I actually started the company. Again, this goes back to 2016 when that utility reached out to us, and it was one of those things where it was like, okay, this feels like a side project. I was still seeing patients full time. I was still traveling around the world with the sports teams. But then by the time we got into like 2018, 2019, I was like, man, I'm really passionate. Again, this goes back to like everyone in my family, like they're hardworking people. And I was just like, this is where I want to be spending my life. So yeah, Vimocity is really focused on partnering primarily with utility and construction companies on giving their safety teams a platform and the tools to be able to implement a movement health program across the workforce. So there's that piece, but then we also engage directly with the workers and give them that framework, give them the digital tools, education to be able to, continue to, enhance the way that they're move and feel on and off the job. And I think that that's a big part. In fact, we even provide access to family members because we just realize that, man, when people go home, that's a great opportunity for us to continue to help people, take care of their bodies. And that's, I think, different. We don't necessarily see ourselves just as a safety program because, oftentimes people put their hat on and then take it off, in different contexts. But we really want to see this more holistically. And so, yeah, so Vimocity, we now work with companies all across the United States. We actually are just launching in Europe this week with a wind company.
Whoa.
So it's been pretty cool. I feel so fortunate that we're able to do this.
And all since 2016, huh?
Yeah. And really, basically 2020 is really when we started it full time. So,
wow.
Yeah.
That's cool. And you mentioned right now a little bit, but what's a big difference between your company and Vimocity versus another company who offers something parallel to what you guys do?
Yeah, no, I appreciate you asking that. And again, we see ourselves as there's so many different options out there. We're just, trying to make a difference in people's lives. I think the thing maybe that sets us apart is that, when we first started this company in 2016, we were super hands-on and it was awesome. People loved it, but then the pandemic hit and we realized, we had to completely change our model. And so that's where we really decided to have like the digital component be a big part of how we engage with people and how we continued to educate people. And so that integration to the infrastructure. So like, a lot of the companies that we work with, every safety meeting, they're showing like a 2-minute video on different concepts so that we can reinforce the education. So it's not just like a one and done, like people get excited and then they forget about it. It's like, how do we help nudge people in the right direction on a continual basis so that they can change those habits? And so our sweet spot is working with companies that have a geographically spread out population where it's really difficult to, actually engage people. There are a lot of solutions where an athletic trainer or physical therapist goes on site and they provide care, and that's awesome, like incredible. But what we realize is that, there are a lot of people who are remote that maybe never show up to the office. So how do we capture those people? And so our sweet spot is really being able to support really large organizations that, have a large footprint so that we can ensure that we're capturing each person and we're focused very much on the prevention rather than just the reaction. reactionary care.
Cool.
Yeah.
What's that process look like if someone wants to get started? Walk us through that a little bit.
Yeah. Well, always the first step is just us doing discovery and being able to talk to companies and say, what are we really trying to solve here? Like, is this a check the box, or is it like, no, we really want to dive in deep. So oftentimes we have some, pretty in-depth conversations about what the company is trying to accomplish. And then we start to do some discovery in terms of like, what is the extent of the issue that we're trying to solve. So we'll look at like 3 to 5 years of injury data. We'll start to kind of piece together so we call them musculoskeletal disorders, the MSDs, how those actually are impacting the organization. We try to understand the culture and the footprint of the company so that we can develop a plan that's going to really be sustainable. And then how do we integrate into the daily infrastructure? So there's a ton of discovery to lead up just to make sure that we're going to be a right fit. Because again, if those 3 leading indicators that I talked about, like if there's not like buy-in from the top level, if we have trouble getting managers to support something like that, or if it's not able to be integrated into the infrastructure, or if new employees can't be integrated, it's just not going to be a good fit. But if we do those things, it's amazing the results that we see. So we do a lot of diligence to make sure that there's a good partnership there and that we can really accomplish what we set out to achieve.
That's cool.
Yeah.
What's some of that feedback you get from the clients, and then more importantly, maybe the workforce?
Yeah. So some feedback that we'll get is like from the safety and the executive team. They'll say, this is one of those programs that shifts the needle. I mean, we have the data to be able to show that companies that participate in this program and, engage in this partnership, they reduce not only the number of injuries, but they also see a decrease in the severity of the injuries. Again, going back to we're really helping them build durability in the workforce. So we'll see a reduction in days away and restricted time. And so to me, that's like a measure of like, are we creating a more durable workforce? Like, number one, they're getting injured less, but there are less severe injuries. So the effectiveness is definitely one of the things that we hear, but we also hear that it's one of the first employee embrace programs that they've implemented because people truly love it, because we really try to focus on this is for the employees. It's not just like to check the boxes, to give them a better life so that they can do the things that they care about both on and off the job and they can live their best life. And so we really try to position it as it's a benefit. It's a chance for you to, take care of your body and to learn how to do that and to have fun in the process. And so that's one of the things. And then we do produce a lot of content that is really targeted towards continuing the education. And we put a lot of time and resources into making sure that's really high quality and that it's applicable to the workforce and that it's short. We live in a YouTube culture where, people want 2 minutes or less, but they want it to also be engaging. And so oftentimes we'll hear people say like, I used to hate the safety training videos that came out, and this is stuff that I actually like, I can relate to, and it, I can put it into practice right away.
Absolutely. I'm gonna go ahead and give my opinion on that. Not that it matters, but like I was given some of the videos from your team, and they're super cool. They're done neatly. They're extremely relevant to what we do. The actors are good. You're in a lot of them. I know some of your performance coaches are a lot of them, but just even the examples showing the worker climbing, it's not cheesy. It looks real. It brings a lot of light to some of the issues. So it's really cool. Yeah.
Yeah. One of the coolest things that's happened is we realized that like I would go on site with a company. They'd pay me a lot of money to do an ergonomic observation. And the only people that would benefit from it was the technician or the lineman that I was working with, and then maybe a safety person who read the report. And I'm like, this is ridiculous. And then I do the exact same thing at another utility. I'm like, everybody is doing the exact same job tasks. Like, we just need to create a video library that shows not how to do the job task, but how to best position your body when you perform the job task. And so one of the cool things is that we started to partner with our utility companies and say, hey, can we work with you to produce 4 job tasks videos on how to do like climbing a pole or, working on a meter set, things like that. And if you're okay with it, can will you share your videos with the rest of the utilities if they share their videos with you? And so what it's done is it's given us access. Now we will go to training facilities. We'll actually work with linemen, with gas techs, with generation employees, at their training facilities. We create these really high production videos. And then everybody that we work with gets access to those. We have like 60 library videos in our library that are all highly produced. And I think the workers appreciate it because they're like, oh, I can see myself doing it. Like that's someone who does this day in and day out. It's not just an actor who's, in that video. And so it's been a really cool collaborative process. And it just comes from this, this perspective that, safety is not proprietary. And so we all get better, like all ships rise when the tide goes up if we're all working together. And so that's been a pretty cool partnership. And we work with over 20 utilities in the US. And so that's been a pretty neat thing.
Absolutely. That's cool.
Yeah.
Kevin, we're going to shift or start wrapping this thing up, but I want to give opportunity to talk about anything with Vimocity that I didn't cover.
Yeah, no, I think that, one of the big conversations right now in safety does relate to serious injuries and fatalities. And so that's topic number one. Topic number two relates to mental health and well-being in the workplace. And so those are two areas that, we're really starting to move into just because we know it's really relevant. And so like last week, we did a great webinar with Dr. Katie Welfare, who was one of the original people that helped put together a lot of the components of the energy wheel. And so we're really going to start to have a lot of free opportunities, like through our LinkedIn site, webinars that focus on those type of topics. In about a month and a half, we're going to do one on mental health and movement health and try to bring some of those concepts together. So yeah, if people want to follow me on LinkedIn or follow Vimocity on LinkedIn, we'll definitely have a lot of free opportunities for people to continue to learn about some of these topics.
Cool. Thank you. And I'll link all those in the podcast description. All right, let's roll into, we'll have a little fun. We got some time for a little bit of fun. You good on time?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. All right, we'll take a pause with producer Paul. Obviously, I'm filling in as a host, but this segment is powered by Dragonware FR. Go visit our friends at dragonwarefr.com. All right, Kevin, July 20th on Netflix at AT&T Stadium, Jake Paul and Mike Tyson will be fighting. Jake Paul is 27 years old, and Mike Tyson will be 58 years old. What's going to be your protocol recommendation for Mike Tyson as he steps in the ring here?
Yeah, I'm impressed with this. I actually didn't know that this is happening, so I'm not very well prepared for that. But what I would say is that Mike Tyson is he's got to focus on the fundamentals, right? If he performs at his highest level, he'll do well. But yeah, he's probably got to focus on his recovery and technique. That's going to be an interesting match to watch for sure.
Can you believe this is the world we live in? Like,
yeah,
it's like I usually don't watch these exhibition bouts. I didn't watch the one with Mike Tyson. Obviously, I'm just a Mike Tyson fanatic at 18 years old, becoming the heavyweight champion. Like the guy was one of one. But I think, and I'll watch this one. But I think it's just weird that this is what we're gonna pay to watch, and I say pay, but it's on Netflix. So
yeah.
It's kind of unique.
It's gonna be fascinating,
right?
Yeah, I can't wait to watch it.
Dude is still scary at 50. Like, he's gonna be 60 years old.
He's fit.
Yes,
like I'm impressed by him. Yeah.
And he's just continuing. Like you thought once we saw him leave, and I think even if you're not a fan of the sport, just that attitude and just that.
Yeah.
He was a world phenomenon. Like it was a culture shift of who he was. It changed my childhood watching him fight. Like that's how you wanted to attack and approach everything. Like you just want everything you were the hammer and everything was the nail.
Yeah.
And he just showed that it was get out of my way, just knocking grown men out. It was crazy.
Yeah. What a fascinating individual.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Cool. So you're gonna watch maybe?
I'll put it on my calendar. This is, like I said, this is news to me. I didn't hear that was happening.
Yeah, obviously it's probably a nice little cash grab, and they're going to cash in on that. But I think, anyways, it's going to be pretty unique to see. So
cool. For sure,
cool, man. That's all I got. Kevin, man, I appreciate your time.
Paul, man, I so appreciate all that you do. I think that this is so unique, especially for this industry. And I mean, you're serving so many people, and I've really enjoyed listening to your other conversations, and incredibly grateful for this opportunity. So thank you.
Cool. I appreciate it. What do you think about the podcast platform? You into it? It's long form conversations, a little different.
I am a podcast junkie. I mean, I literally probably listen to 10 hours of podcasts a week. I mean, when you run a lot and, I mean, I run and drive and that's what I do. So yeah, I love it. So really enjoyed getting to be familiar with your audience. It's been great.
Cool. I appreciate you.
Yeah.
And you run with podcasts? You don't do music or?
No, I like to listen to podcasts.
That's cool, man.
Yeah.
Just kind of get in your zone and just roll.
Totally. Yep.
Well, good luck on your 50K, man. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, I'm excited. Grateful for the opportunity.
Cool. Kevin, I appreciate you. I appreciate your team. It was a pleasure working with you guys. Hope to have you on again in the near future, man.
Yeah, thanks a lot. Keep up the good work.
Appreciate it, man. Thanks.
Yep, bye.
All right, guys, that's going to do it. Appreciate you. I want to thank the entire Sturgis County workforce. Without you, this podcast wouldn't be possible. Once again, thanks to Team Vimocity and Kevin. All right, guys, that's going to do it. Catch you in the next one.